The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NBA.
Why the Clippers will not be found guilty.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast.
So, here's what happened. Steve Ballmer invested in Aspiration, this environmental company that was supposed to plant trees. He thought they were legit, and they were someone that was pro-environment. And as everybody knows, Intuit Dome is the most sustainable arena in the league, and it's all about, being environmentally friendly and all that type of stuff. They were frauds, and they weren't coming, they weren't delivering on their promises, so we terminated that partnership in 2023. But all these events that we're talking about happened before that termination. So we got to go back to really 2022 and 2023. So Ballmer invested in Aspiration, right? So did Robert Downey Jr., so did a lot of A-list celebrities. Ballmer's star player was paid $28 million to promote Aspiration, that player being Kawhi. So they sponsored Kawhi. However, the fishy part is that Kawhi didn't do anything to promote them. Now, Clipper fans know very well Kawhi was inactive on socials. He had no social media platform. He doesn't do that kind of stuff. The guy didn't even know how to flip his phone screen, to flip the camera on a phone, on an iPhone. So the part that's fishy is, what company pays someone $28 million, which was more than all those other celebrities were getting paid, to not promote them at all? That's where the first bit of fishiness comes in, where it's like, what? Like, if you're paying someone $28 million, they better be at least giving you some shout outs, some retweets. That wasn't happening for Kawhi, which makes it suspect. So that anonymous Aspiration employee on Pablo Torre's podcast basically was saying that that's where the suspicion comes from, that Steve Ballmer essentially paid him the $28 million instead of Aspiration and hid behind the Aspiration name, because in his contract, and this is where it gets to the point where I think this actually helps the Clippers case, in the contract, it kept saying, had like outs on every deliverable that Kawhi Leonard would have needed to provide. For example, it said things like, if requested to do so by company. We cannot prove that the company asked Kawhi to do anything, to promote them or anything. Of course, they would have wanted that, but we cannot prove that there was an actual request there. And the employee's backing that statement up. And then you have another one where it was, if it's not consistent with his beliefs. That's very vague and broad. So essentially, there's an out for Kawhi Leonard to do nothing and still get paid in the contract, right? This is where there's an aha moment, right, for people. The part that's interesting is where in the contract it says, if Kawhi is no longer a Clipper employee, Aspiration can terminate the endorsement. Now, if Kawhi and the Clippers are on separate endorsements with, like, Ballmer's invested and they're a partner with the Clippers, right? But Kawhi is getting paid to promote them. That's a separate entity. If Kawhi Leonard was, let's say, to be traded, right, he should still be a partner with Aspiration. But you can easily say, if you're the Clippers, we are the team that had a partnership with Aspiration, not any other NBA team. We wanted our star player. Like, it made sense for our star player to be a partner with them, to be sponsored by them, our biggest name. If Kawhi Leonard goes, then we can terminate that, and they can partner up with another Clipper player instead. That would be where the Clippers' defense is. Now, this is where I believe they just can't ding us. I mean, they can, but I think they won't. Unless you prove that Steve Ballmer paid Kawhi Leonard that $28 million, that money came, by the way, he was still owed $7 million, so let's say it was $21 million. Unless you can prove that, There's not enough hard evidence. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence that makes you connect dots and be like, this is a little weird. A guy getting $28 million to do absolutely nothing and having all these outs in his contract. So essentially what they're saying is Steve Ballmer's using aspiration to pay Kawhi Leonard extra money and have that contract in writing as to say there's nothing that you can't trace it back to me, basically. You know, you can't ding us for it because it's in the contract that Kawhi Leonard, if it's not in his beliefs, doesn't have to promote aspiration at all. But why would aspiration do that in the first place? Unless it's not really aspiration, it's Steve Ballmer paying him more money, essentially circumventing the contract. So, in my opinion, so people might be wondering, if there's no proof, then we can't get dinged, right? Wrong, actually. You can get hit with these penalties on circumstantial evidence, right? But will the NBA actually penalize that off of that assumption, off of this guy's podcast? They've opened up the investigation. Personally, I just don't think they will. There's just not enough there unless they find that Steve Ballmer actually paid Kawhi. Now, there is another twist in this tale. By the way, so Steve Ballmer, you would have to think, even if he did it to cover his tracks. So that's another thing as well. I don't think Steve Ballmer's an idiot. What an incredible, and it was funny because before this whole thing, I was like, man, I'm struggling to find topics to talk about. We're in the dog days of the offseason, before training camp, and all of a sudden we're the talk of the NBA world. So here's what I got. Today, a new article came out from Locked On Celtics' very own John Corrales of the Boston Sports Journal, saying that Kawhi's endorsement deal was not $28 million, it was $48 million. Now, I'm quoting the article now, but the Leonard deal was a curious one. A source within the company told Boston Sports Journal, according to our source, none of the high-powered executives were consulted about the massive $28 million endorsement deal Leonard signed, and Cherney never presented the deal to Aspiration's board of directors. Boston Sports Journal has learned the deal was presented to the executive team as is, with no opportunity for further analysis. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. The $28 million deal was to be paid in quarterly installments over 4 years, which was said in the podcast, but it was not the only compensation Leonard received. According to a high-level source, so that's one source, not multiple, but it's a source, I guess, from Boston Sports Journal, and I trust Corrales, he's our guy. According to a high-level source, Leonard also cut a side deal with Aspiration to receive an additional $20 million in company stock. The stock was to be paid out from Sandberg's personal holdings. Sandberg is the co-CEO. Sandberg's personal holdings in the company over 4 years. That brought the total of promised compensation to Leonard to $48 million. Around the same time as the Leonard deal, Aspiration was going through its rounds of fundraising. They had raised approximately $600 million, including the previously mentioned $250 million from Oak Tree Capital Management. That number also included a $50 million investment from Steve Ballmer. And so that's where it gets fishy, right? $50 million from Steve Ballmer, Kawhi's getting $48 million. It's almost an exact match, which makes people think that's more evidence that money that Steve Ballmer invested went right into Kawhi Leonard's pocket. It is a little fishy, I can't lie. So the truth is, I don't know. You know, the Clipper fan in me wants to believe that Steve Ballmer would never do such a thing, that Steve Ballmer plays by the rules, and there's no reason for Steve Ballmer to pay Kawhi Leonard extra money when we've already acquiesced to all his demands. We've tried to get him a point guard. We got him his second star upon arrival. We've let him load manage. We've let him bring his medical guys in. Kawhi Leonard, as Lon Murray always said, or says, Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers have been lockstep every step of the way since he arrived in LA in the summer of 2019. There's so much at risk for Steve Ballmer as an owner, especially as a newer owner, to pay him under the table like that and to use a company to do so. So it just doesn't make sense. However, the parts that are fishy are paying Kawhi Leonard to not promote anything, right? A guy who's only really known for basketball. We're not talking about a Robert Downey Jr. who people that don't even like sports know because Iron Man's big and all the other movies he's been in. You know what I'm saying? Drake, one of the biggest stars on the planet right now. But there again, the Clippers have an argument here, right? We invested in the company. They were a partner with the Clippers. Our star player was sponsored. You didn't, he could have promoted, but he could have not. It's in the contract. And then Steve Ballmer invested. And by the way, this is just one source with that extra $20 million, but Steve Ballmer invested $50 million and Kawhi Leonard got $50 million. It is a little fishy, though. I cannot lie. I would be lying if I said it wasn't. So I don't know the truth. I don't know the truth. I just think it makes let me just be honest. It would make more sense if Steve Ballmer paid Kawhi Leonard and this all happened when we got Kawhi. But there was no agreement with aspiration in 2021 from Ballmer. Sorry, in 2019 from Ballmer. So this all happened after. I just don't see why a guy that tore his ACL, who should be thankful to get the max in the first place, is getting more money. Of course, Kawhi's going to take everything he can get, but, it's strange. Now, I at first thought, man, Kawhi didn't deliver on advertising them. That's on him, not the Clippers. But then I saw that the contract stated he didn't really have to. That's where it gets a little strange. So the truth is, I don't know. But I don't think that they're going to really find anything concrete. Because I think Ballmer's smart enough to, even if he did do it, have his, bases covered with this. Now, this was the statement that the LA Clippers released yesterday. Neither the Clippers nor Steve Ballmer circumvented the salary cap. The notion that Steve invested in aspiration in order to funnel money to Kawhi Leonard is absurd. Steve invested because Aspiration's co-founders presented themselves as committed to doing right by their customers while protecting the environment. After a long campaign of market manipulation, which defrauded not only Steve, but numerous other investors in sports teams, Aspiration filed for bankruptcy. Its co-founder, Joseph Sandberg, recently pleaded guilty to a $243 million fraud. Neither Steve nor the Clippers had knowledge of any improper activity by Aspiration or its co-founder until after the government initiated its investigation. Aspiration was a team sponsor for the 2021-22 and 2022-23 seasons before defaulting on its contract. There is nothing unusual or untoward about team sponsors doing endorsement deals with players on the same team. Neither Steve nor the Clippers organization had any oversight of Kawhi's independent endorsement agreement with Aspiration. To say otherwise is flat out wrong. The Clippers take NBA compliance extremely seriously, fully respect the league's rules, and welcome its investigation related to Aspiration. The Clippers will also continue to cooperate with law enforcement and its investigation into Aspiration's blatantly fraudulent activity. That's the statement. So, of course, we're going to come out with a PR statement and save face, duh. But, this is a fraudulent company, which makes you question everything about them. The contract they gave Kawhi, the amount of money they gave him, how close they were with Ballmer. These are guys that were close with Ballmer. So, to pay his player the most is, maybe Ballmer's saying, hey, my player he's your guy, he can make you guys big or whatever it may be. I mean, it's not like, and here's the thing, Ballmer could just be helping Kawhi out in that sense, not paying him, but getting Aspiration to pay him that money. Because do Aspiration execs and people that, are in control of who they're sponsoring, do they know that Kawhi Leonard's not active on socials? Do they know anything about that? We don't know that either. Now, of course, there's a lot of documentation that Pablo Torre had on that desk that he didn't show us, but I'm guessing that he showed us the most important things.
The NFL season is finally here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. I got A lot of bets in week one. I'll tell you that. A lot of lines that I like. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
Cam Thomas signs his qualifying offer after failing to reach a contract agreement with the Nets.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast.
Cam Thomas, his free agent stalemate with Brooklyn finally coming to an end as he signed his 1-year, $6 million qualifying offer. According to Shams Charania, and setting the stage for what went down here, we've heard obviously about the negotiations and there being a big gap between the two sides. But Shams reported on the heels of this that Brooklyn's offer to Thomas included a 2-year, $30 million deal with a team option in the second year, and also a 1-year, $9.5 million deal with incentives up to $11 million, but he would have to waive his no trade clause. And with him accepting this 1-year, $6 million qualifying offer, he will be an unrestricted free agent next summer. He also has a no trade clause during this season. So in the lead up to this, following this and now him finally doing it and taking the qualifying offer, just what was your initial reaction to the news?
Well, Eric, I felt like we were headed this way for a while with Cam Thomas and the Nets, just in the sense of I had never heard they were going to offer more than 2 years. I had heard for a long time 2 for 28, which was about, pretty much around the mid-level. Shams had 2 for 30. So that, came to fruition as far as like an offer. But the team control on year 2 was a must for them. They're in a complete rebuild right now, and so they want the most flexibility possible. What I think is interesting most of all, Eric, is that when you look at last year, when we were at Media Day, I'd asked Cam Thomas, do you feel like you've done enough to be a part of the core? And at that time, he said yes. And so he comes in, he plays 25 games this year. He had multiple hamstring injuries, but he scored – and he was decently efficient, which is, pretty much what he does. And so then that didn't materialize to being a core guy. You look at the draft they had, they took a bunch of players at the guard spot, 5 total first-round picks. It's clear they're kind of shuffling the deck a little bit here. And where Cam Thomas is in that pack really is up in the air, I think, at this point long-term.
I wasn't surprised at all by this news. I thought that it was always a possibility. Like, I thought that, I had questions about whether Cam would actually go there, but I'd said, it's a risky gamble. But if there's ever a player who would be willing to gamble on himself and has that level of confidence, it is Cam Thomas. But I'm not surprised. To me, this is an admission that the Nets don't value him as a core piece moving forward, and they don't view him, as a starting caliber player in the rotation. And the reporting had been, at least from what I'd heard, leading up to this free agency and into it, was that his camp came into negotiations with, allusions and comparisons to guys like Jalen Green, like Jordan Poole, Emmanuel Quickley, those young guards who had gotten paid $30 million, in annual salary. And with Nets being the only team that has cap space this offseason, that just really didn't come to fruition. And I've said that, there's been this discourse that the Nets aren't going to bet against themselves. And even though they're not offering him a ton, they don't have to, they could still value him. But I had pushed back and said that if they're actually risking him taking the qualifying offer and they're squeezing him down to the point where that is a legitimate possibility, to me, that is an admission that they do not value him as a core piece moving forward. Because the qualifying offer is a bad outcome for both sides, in the sense that for Cam, it means it's a massive gamble. He's playing on a 1-year deal at $6 million. He's passing up, he's not getting a significant payday. And for the Nets, when a player signs that QO, they usually are gone the following offseason. And the Nets also don't have, they can't trade him. They can trade him, but he has a no trade clause. So they lose leverage there. It's just, they're not retaining him as an asset. And that to me is a signal that really wasn't too much of a priority. To you, do you feel, we're getting a lot of questions off the heels of this, like, what does this mean? Why did he do this? Do you feel that this is a signal that this is the end of Cam Thomas's time with the Nets? Because that has been my read, if he takes the qualifying offer, that he is going to be gone.
I think when you look at it, if the Nets viewed him, like you said, as a long-term guy, you would have did a multi-year deal, whether it was like a 3-year deal, 4-year deal, something like that. Clearly, they haven't seen enough to value it more than around the mid-level. And so I took a couple things from this. One, Cam Thomas thinking that he was worth more than the mid-level, certainly around the league, wasn't coming to fruition. He's now banking on that next free agency, he will get either the mid-level or more at this point. There are teams that at this moment will have that cap space and availability. But then you go through the trade deadline, teams could absorb contracts and fill up some of that space. It's not a lock. A lot of times now people don't want to get to free agency. For guys like Cam Thomas, Jonathan Kuminga, and, we'll have to see what happens with Josh Giddey and Quentin Grimes, this is a shift. What we're seeing right now is a shift. A lot of times people going into restricted free agency just kind of take what they can get. They're betting on themselves. And in terms of his future or not with Brooklyn, it's hard for me to say that I'm not as confident that he's going to be there long-term now after this. Because if you're Cam Thomas, you're looking at this saying it yourself, they had a shot to give me a multi-year deal. They didn't really want to give me anything great. That tells me all I need to know about them. And if you're Cam Thomas now going into this year, I think the most minutes he's played the past 2 years is about 30, 31 minutes. I'd be shocked if he's getting more than that. If anything, they're going to try to curtail that to either give them the best advantage to keep him long term on a reasonable number. You're not going to let him just like go off completely. I don't think there's the possibility that could happen. Why would you want to let him boost his value that much that then you would lose him possibly for nothing? To trade him now, the ball is in his court.
Can I push back? I think that's a double-edged sword, though, because it's going to be interesting. We'll talk about this in the next segment about what does this mean for Cam's role this coming season, because you just said, why would you let him go off to a point where he's boosting his value and it'll be more difficult for you to retain him. I'd also say, though, if he does go off and he does play really well, maybe they get something for him in a trade, even though he has the no trade clause. They could find a deal maybe with the team where, because perceivably he's going to want to leave, I would think, after this. I don't even think, like you're saying, why would they let him boost the value to the point where they want to retain him? I just don't think that the Nets are in on Cam Thomas. I don't think that he's their guy, based off of let's just look at the actions. How long have we been going through this with Cam Thomas? It was understandable at the beginning of his tenure with the Nets when they didn't play him because they were looking for more complementary 3-and-D pieces around KD and Kyrie. But then they trade KD and Kyrie. He still didn't play during the second half of that season when they desperately needed scoring, with Mikal Bridges and Dinwiddie and DFS and Cam Johnson, those guys. He was still glued to the bench. They only really played him when they absolutely had to. And then, up to this point now, they have a chance to lock him down, and they didn't do it. I say actions. I've said actions speak louder than words always with NBA teams and front offices and players. And I'd say in this case, I think we have actions and words that both signal that the Nets just aren't a Cam Thomas team. I mean, the actions being they didn't offer him, a significant contract, and they let him take the QO. Also, they just made a draft where they made 5 first-round picks, all of which were, high-feel, pass-first guys. Sean Marks gave us a quote. You were there for that press conference after the draft saying, we want to play 0.5-second basketball. The ball doesn't stick. All guys who are bigger, multi-positional defenders can make it tough on defense. None of that. As soon as I heard that quote, I was like, I think Cam Thomas is gone, because none of it matched the way that Cam Thomas plays or the way that it seems like the Nets want to build. And now they're at a point where I just think that, this signals the beginning of the end, whether he leaves in free agency or whether they get, whether they get something in a trade for him.
Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's a 401k or properties or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I linked all my accounts to Monarch and immediately spotted a few subscriptions I wasn't even using. Canceling those all can save you money every month. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL.
Euro Giannis makes his return.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast.
Frank, I suppose everything we mentioned at the intro, we'll start with the easiest one here. Giannis made his return after a 2-game absence in Euro to lead Greece to a win. They had already clinched a spot in the top 16. But how much have you seen of Giannis in Euro so far, besides today's game?
I've watched all the games, Justin. I'm doing my homework.
Did you pay the $20 for it, or did you find other ways?
Yeah, no, I subscribed to the FIBA Courtside Live app. First off, very annoying that, either NBA TV or ESPN doesn't just pony up the tiny amount of money it presumably would have taken to carry this in the US and, give us TV-based access to it. But yeah, I've used this Courtside app previously, and, I always try to remember to cancel my subscription after these tournaments so that I don't, pay any more to it than I need to. But yeah, I've watched the 3 games that Giannis has played. I accidentally missed the prior 2, Cyprus, which I didn't even realize. Like, I wasn't clear to me. I thought the Cyprus game, they may have just rested him because Cyprus is the hosts and they're terrible, so they didn't need him against Cyprus. But then holding him out the last game against our friends from Georgia, including. I'm sorry. The Bosnia. I watched the Georgia game before that. I was like, wait a minute. No. I watched him play against Mamu and the Georgians, and Mamu had a huge dunk, by the way, in that game, which was pretty cool. But yeah, I've watched the 3 games Giannis has played, and it was actually pretty important that they win today, because if they finished 4th, I believe, or sorry, if they had lost, I think there was a good chance they were going to finish 4th and thus play France in the round of 16, which nobody wants France, given how good even without Wemby, they're, one of the favorites. So now they get Israel, which certainly Israel is not a pushover either. I feel like every time I've seen Denny Avdia against the Bucks the last couple of years, he's like, looking like prime Miami LeBron or something, like getting like 18 free throws and whatever. But yeah, so now they have Israel. I can't remember if it was Sunday or Monday, but
Sunday.
But yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed. Obviously, they can advance, and obviously, would be massive for Giannis to win any medal really.
Yeah.
At the Euros, since it's been a minute since Greece has medaled internationally, and I don't know. I was thinking about that the other day. Like, I mean, if Giannis won any international tournament, whether it's Eurobasket, World Cup, obviously Olympics. I mean, I have to imagine in many ways that maybe it wouldn't be quite winning an NBA championship, but in terms of what it means for him, as a Greek, as someone obviously that, grew up having to basically fight for his identity as a Greek citizen and not getting his official citizenship till he was, 18 years old or whatever it was. It obviously has a pronounced meaning for him, and we'll see what happens. Greece are not the favorites, but they, I think, at least have a fighting chance. And I think what we saw today, Giannis, I think he had 25, 14, 9 assists, and it was very obvious that Spain, which they're the reigning champs, they're now bounced from the tournament. They were not going to let Giannis, really get room to beat them one-on-one. So they just kind of doubled him immediately, 3-2 zoned him, all that stuff. And he had 4 assists in the first quarter, and then got it going a bit offensively in the second quarter. And then, ultimately finished with 25 and, had a couple of big buckets in the fourth quarter down the stretch as well. So it was fun to watch, him do Giannis stuff and have to play make, and obviously just physically dominate as well. The FIBA rules obviously can lead to more congestion in the paint, but he's Giannis. He's a problem solver. So it's been fun to watch. I think he's had 31, 29, and 25 now in the 3 games. So I mean, he's obviously just been putting up the massive Giannis numbers that we're accustomed to.
They play Sunday afternoon. I don't know if this is Eastern time or if what I'm looking at has already converted it.
Packers or Greece
to Central. Well, it's right in the almost perfect time. So it's 1:45 that they play. But it's either 1:45 or 12:45, depending on if this is Eastern time I'm looking at. But regardless, it should time out pretty close to perfectly to get a double dip to see Giannis in the round of 16, and then the Packers open their season shortly after that. When we touched on the point production we've seen from him, I'm not trying to, based on what we've seen Giannis do in Euro against some of those teams, here's what to expect. But one of the things Camille and I were talking about the other day with Van Fias on their show was the numbers for Giannis and what to expect. What do you think he's more likely to set a career high in this season, points or assists?
Hashtag why not both meme.
Both.
That's a really interesting question. I mean, it's sort of interesting. There have been a few seasons where I've wondered, is this the year that Giannis could average like 7 or 8 assists? And it's always sort of gravitated back to, 6 or so per game. He's never veered far under or above that number. So I think you could certainly make the case that this year might be different just because they're going to need him to make more. So I think my first inclination would be assists, but you just think about how much they're going to need him to score as well. And so I think, if you're doing over-unders, you'd probably start with his career high. I'd probably say, maybe, I don't know if I'd say the over-under is 7 assists per game, but I think that there's a pretty decent chance this could be the year that he finally kind of, breaks that and gets into the kind of career high assist numbers. Now, I don't think he's going to be like 8 or 9 assists a game.
You don't think he's going to average a triple double?
But who knows? No, I don't think that. But I don't know. I mean, and the reality is, like, I mean, Giannis likes getting assists. Like, I'm not saying he's like, cares about his stats as much as I do, Justin. But we always see it when he's close to triple double. He knows it, and he goes assist hunting, and whatever. So we'll see. But I'm sure that's in the back of his mind, the idea of basically being a more dynamic passer and showing that of course I think he absolutely wants to win an MVP this year. Perhaps more so just because, he probably realizes that winning a championship is going to be harder than it's been, in recent years, even when the team hasn't come close to that in recent years either. So we'll see. But I don't know. It's a great question. I can't have a hard time choosing. I think he's got a great chance to do both.
So, I mean, that's where I kind of landed too, of like, well, I think it'll probably be the high in both, but I almost identical to your answer. Like, I know at one point Camille and I threw out the 32 and 8, which is more likely. I think I could see both, but not those numbers specifically, career highs, but just like by 1/10 of a point that he's setting those career highs. So it's not like a massive jump,